Hey everybody, welcome back to Pete's Classic Cycle, and now for something completely different. So what we have before you here is a 1977 Arctic Cat Kitty Cat Snowmobile. That's right, a snowmobile on Pete's Classic Cycle. But come on, can you blame me? These things are absolutely so cool. They were produced from, I believe, 1972 to 1998. So if you were a kid growing up around snowmobiles within that time period, guaranteed you dreamed about having one of these. And up until the 120cc 4-strokes came in the early 2000s, this was the way to get your kid into snowmobiling. So how about we pop the hood and see what makes this little cat purr. Got these cute little bungees here. As we pop the hood, we've got a nice single-cylinder 60cc 2-stroke engine made by Suzuki. I believe the first few years from 72 to 76, I think. It was actually a similar motor, but made by Kawasaki. So yeah, 60cc 2-stroke with a centrifugal clutch powering the drivetrain. This particular set came to me quite a few years ago when I was a young lad in my 20s, well before I had kids, but definitely way too big to ride one. When it came to me, it was in pretty rough shape, both cosmetically and mechanically. I tore the whole thing down, repainted, new hardware, new hood, new graphics, new seat cover, but I never really took care of the mechanical side because I knew I was just simply too big to ride it. But now that my kids are old enough to be able to ride this thing, it's time to take it apart once again and get this thing running tip-top for my kids to enjoy this winter. So as you can see, I've got the top end of the motor torn apart, and I discovered something funny which might explain why this thing never ran quite right. Well, that arrow is supposed to always point towards the exhaust port on the 2-stroke. And on this particular motor, whoever worked on the last put the piston in backwards. So instead of looking like this, you can see the offset there. So the right one here is correct. The left one here is how it was installed. So basically, it was just completely out of whack. So just a quick recap of things that were done to the motor. Reinstalled the original piston in the correct orientation, resurfaced the mating surfaces for the head and the cylinder because there was a leak through that gasket, cleaned out the carburetor that was all gummed up with last few years of gunk just sitting there. I was going to install a new piston, but it turns out that it's one of those cheap kits you get offline, and the grooves for the piston rings weren't even machined big enough to allow the rings to recess into them. Just complete junk, garbage. So hopefully with all of those things kind of fixed and looked over, the kitty cat should be good to go. Well, that clearly didn't go to plan. As you guys can see, the motor's once again out of the kitty cat. Basically what happened was I started up the sled, it ran great, but it was stuck with wide open throttle. Now for a very quick layman's rundown on how the governor is actuated, you've got these really cool little weights here at the end of the crankshaft, where when the motor spools up, the weights will extend outwards, which pushes this here pin or arm out, which then hits against this flappy paddle, which rotates this here shaft, which then controls this actuator arm, which helps control the throttle. What was happening in my case was whoever worked on this motor last did not install this properly, and basically this arm was constantly locked in its outmost position. which then had the flappy arm pinned up against the case. And when everything's connected, that means the throttle actuator is stuck wide open. So basically the whole governor system was jammed up, not allowing anything to do its job, which makes sense because it looked like the previous owner did some sort of jerry-rigging bypass to mitigate all the problems instead of actually fixing the thing itself. Well, with all the issues with the governor now found and fixed, it's time to put it back together, get the motor back in the sled, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that's lots of the issues and the kitty cat will finally be running under its own power with everything working as it should. Wish me luck, guys.
How was that, Izzy?